Welcome to Too Fond of Books. I'm Janelle. And since I'm relatively new to the booktube community, I wanted to do a video where I kind of introduced myself, and I thought it would be fun to do that by talking about 5 of my favorites. So in this video, I'm going to share five of my favorite books. So here we go. Appointment with Death, Agatha Christie. She wrote this book in 1937. And here's a great quote to get us started. They have been in prison so long that if the prison door stands open, they would no longer notice. Dr. Gerard. So in Appointment with Death, this is a Hercule Poirot mystery. We are on vacation in Jerusalem and also in Petra. And this is one of the reasons why I love this book so much, is the setting is fantastic. You can tell it's an area that Agatha Christie is familiar with, so she's writing from a place of experience. And so that is really great. So in this book, we have a family on vacation in Jerusalem. And as the back says, a strange family bound together by a hatred for their matriarch, the monstrous and evil Mrs. Boynton. A woman of no redeeming features, she had delightedly driven a beautiful young girl to the edge of madness and already held a brother and sister in a web of invidious terror. Her thirst for vengeance and torture was insatiable. But now, in the dark shadows of a desert night, Mrs. Boynton lay dead. There was no doubt that she had been murdered, nor were any tears shed over the crime. But it was up to Hercule Poirot to find the killer, with everyone a suspect, every suspect providing a motive, and every motive a possible lie. So, as I said, one of the reasons why I love this book is the setting is fantastic. I also love the first sentence in this book. I think it's one of the great first sentences. You do see, don't you, that she's got to be killed. Ooh. And the other reason I really love this book is the character of Mrs. Boynton. Now, she is the victim, but she is so well described, and she is just evil. She loves to psychologically torture her daughter and stepchildren, and she is just, she's just awful. She's one of the worst villains I've ever read in mysteries. And so, yeah, so Mrs. Boynton is great. Another great thing about this is Poirot gives himself a 24-hour deadline to solve the case, and so that's really fun. It makes the pacing stay fast, and he's got to get it done in 24 hours. And so I'm just going to read you this one little description here of Mrs. Boynton. Dr. Gerard lowered his papers and took a full, satisfying gaze at old Mrs. Boynton. She was looking after her daughter, and her fat face was creased into a peculiar smile. It was, very faintly, a caricature of the lovely, unearthly smile that had transformed the girl's face so short a time before. The old woman transferred her gaze to Nadine, who had just sat down again. She raised her eyes and met her mother-in-law's glance. Her face was quite imperturbable. That's a hard word to say. The old woman's glance was malicious. Dr. Gerard thought, what an absurdity of an old tyrant. Suddenly, the old woman's eyes were full on him, and he drew in his breath sharply. Small, black, smoldering eyes they were, but something came from them, a power, a definite force, a wave of evil. Dr. Gerard knew something about the power of personality. He realized that here was no spoiled tyrannical invalid indulging petty whims. This old woman was a definite force. In the malignancy of her glare, he felt a resemblance to the effect produced by a cobra. Mrs. Boynton might be old, infirm, a prey to disease, but she was not powerless. She was a woman who knew the meaning of power, who had exercised a lifetime of power, and who had never once doubted her own force. Dr. Gerard had once met a woman who performed a most dangerous and spectacular act with tigers. The great slinking brutes had crawled to their places and performed their degrading and humiliating tricks. Their eyes and subdued snarls told of hatred. bitter, fanatical hatred. But they had obeyed, cringed. That had been a young woman, a woman with an arrogant, dark beauty, but the look had been the same. So, Agatha Christie's Appointment with Death. My next favorite book is Sharon Bolton's Dead Woman Walking. Now, this is from 2017. It's one of Sharon Bolton's standalone novels, and I absolutely love this story. It is my favorite Sharon Bolton, and I love Sharon Bolton. So, this has a great plot, good characters. I'm looking at my notes here in case you're wondering why I'm looking down. It's tense. It has a fantastic twist. The scene where the killer is tracking the hot air balloon is terrifying. Now, maybe because I'm scared of heights, I'm more scared of that scene than other people might be, but it is just terrifying. This book is just really fun. So let me read the back. Just before dawn, in the hills near the Scottish border, 13 passengers on a hot air balloon flight witness a brutal murder. Within the next hour, all but one of them will be dead. Alone, scared, and trusting no one, she flees for her life, running to the one place she feels safe. But she's seen the killer's face, and he's seen hers, and he won't rest until he's eliminated the last witness to his crime. So let me read the first paragraph in Dead Woman Walking. This woman, Jessica Lane, should have died. 11 people were killed in that crash. Not only did Lane survive, she walked away. She's still walking. So I want to know where she's going. I want to know why she hasn't been in touch. Why isn't she seeking help? Why she's deliberately avoiding the police. I want to know who she's running from. Most of all, I want her found. So, Sharon Bolton, Dead Woman Walking. Next up in my 5 favorites for today is Wilkie Collins' The Woman in White. And I absolutely love this book. He wrote this in 1860. And it's considered the first sensation novel. And a sensation novel, according to an article I read from the British Library, and I love this description, is a play on the nerves. It plays on the nerves and thrills the senses. Someone else described sensation novels as combining romance and realism. And romance here is the quality or feeling of mystery, excitement, and remoteness. And those are great descriptions of this book. This book has never been out of print, and it's 160 years old. Wilkie Collins was a contemporary of Charles Dickens. I love the characters in this book. I love the story. So first of all, let me give you a rundown of this story. I'm going to read the back. On a moonlit road in Hampstead, Walter Hartwright is accosted by a stranger dressed from head to toe in white. She asks the way to London, and no sooner has Walter directed her than he is overtaken by a carriage in pursuit of the mysterious woman, who has evidently escaped from an asylum. From this single incident, Walter unwinds a thrilling story of abduction, madness, false identity, and shameful family secrets. The Woman in White is both a Victorian sensation novel and a detective story. It established Collins as a popular author and has never been out of print. So I think some of the things that I love about this book are the characters, definitely. Marian Halcombe is fantastic. She's one of my favorite characters. She is strong, she is determined, she is courageous, and this is especially interesting in a time when women had so little power of their own. She had so little power, and the danger to her reputation was very real. We don't understand that so much in our society today, but it was a very real danger for her. And so I just really love Marian Halcombe as a character. I also love Count Fosco. He is one of the most fantastic villains ever written, I believe, in fiction. He is so fantastic. He is, I believe, probably the first of those villains that are, you know, full of manners, that are gentlemanly, and yet terrifying. And so I love Count Fosco. He's also like so creepy because he loves white mice. Those are his pets. He keeps these white mice, and ugh, that's just so icky. This story is told from multiple narrators, which is very interesting. You can get in the mind of multiple narrators. And I love the gravestone of Wilkie Collins. He's buried in Kensal Green in London, and his gravestone reads, "Author of The Woman in White and Other Works of Fiction." I love that. I think that's great. Because arguably the Moonstone is probably his more famous book. It's called The First Detective Story, and The Moonstone is pretty great, but I love The Woman in White. So if you've never read it, check it out, read it. It's really great. It is 160 years old, but it's fast-paced, and you can get through it. So don't be daunted by what would be considered a classic. The Woman in White, Wilkie Collins. I'm going to read from the very beginning. The First Epoch. The story begun by Walter Hartwright, of Clement's Inn, teacher of drawing. This is the story of what a woman's patience can endure and what a man's resolution can achieve. The Woman in White. Next up is another Agatha Christie, and I am not ashamed because Agatha Christie is my favorite author, and this is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. This was published in 1926, and I would say at this point in time it is my favorite Agatha Christie novel. I absolutely love this story. I recently reread it, and I think some people don't reread mysteries because you know the plot, you know who did it, but I love to reread it and watch for the clues and the hints that Agatha Christie peppers throughout the plots, because she is so subtle that it's so easy to miss them. You get to the end and you're thinking, what? I didn't guess that at all. But when you go back and you reread, you see, oh, there and there and there, and you realize that you missed it, or you misunderstood it, or you misinterpreted it. It's fantastic. It's definitely a fair play novel. This caused a lot of sensation when it was first printed because people were claiming that it wasn't fair play. At the time, in the golden age of mystery, authors were expected to write a mystery that was fair play, which means the reader could read through, see all the clues, and conceivably guess who the killer was. And so people were complaining that this wasn't fair play, but it really is. You just have to really watch for it. She's very subtle. It's fantastic. And so here's a great quote. Hercule Poirot says, "The truth, however ugly in itself, is always curious and beautiful to the seeker after it." I love that. And the interesting thing is, when I read that, I thought, I just recently posted a quote by a Hercule Poirot novel that talked about truth that sounded very similar. So I went back and I checked, and in Murder in Three Acts, which is a Poirot novel from 1934, Poirot says, "In all the world there is nothing so curious, so interesting, and so beautiful as truth." So now I'm thinking I need to go through and do a study of the concept of truth in Agatha Christie's novels, maybe specifically in the Poirot ones, because both of these quotes are Poirot, so Poirot's understanding of truth and what he believes about truth. I think that could be really interesting. I'm not entirely sure how I would do that, but I think it would be very, very interesting. So if you read any Agatha Christie, I recommend The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Very interesting. Here's the synopsis. First published in 1926, this is the book that transformed Agatha Christie from a fairly successful mystery writer into an international sensation. Lord Mountbatten claimed to have given the author the initial idea for the murder of Roger Ackroyd, which has kept critics and readers alike debating for over 70 years as to whether the Queen of Whodunits overstepped the rules of fair play in her shocking denouement. In the village of King's Abbot is in an uproar. The trouble began back when Mrs. Ferrar's husband died under dubious circumstances. Some gossips even say he was poisoned. Now his widow has taken a final dose of veronal and left a mysterious letter behind for her paramour, wealthy Roger Ackroyd of Fernley Green. But before he can unseal the envelope, Ackroyd is found dead in his study, stabbed with a silver Tunis dagger, with the letter nowhere in sight. Stranger still, a retired foreign gentleman with an egg-shaped head, partially covered with suspiciously black hair, 2 immense mustaches, and a pair of watchful eyes, has taken up residence in the larches and taken to growing vegetable marrows. Fortunately for King's Abbot, the great Hercule Poirot does not have a green thumb. So, the murder of Roger Ackroyd. This is narrated by the village doctor, Dr. Shepherd, and here's the first sentence. Mrs. Ferrars died on the night of the 16th, 17th September, a Thursday. I was sent for at 8 o'clock on the morning of Friday the 17th. There was nothing to be done. She had been dead some hours. So, read it, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And then finally, the fifth of my five of my favorites is Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is my favorite Jane Austen. She wrote this in, it was published in 1818, which is after she died. It is her last full-length novel. And I love the story of Anne Elliot in Persuasion. Anne Elliot is a woman, I think she's about 27, 28, which means at that time she was an old maid. There were, really no hopes for her of getting married. And when she was younger, 8 years earlier, she had the chance to marry Captain Wentworth, a man that she loved, but she was persuaded by a dear family friend not to marry him because he didn't have enough prospects. Mrs. Russell was worried that Anne Elliot wouldn't be in a marriage with a man who could take care of her. And so she was persuaded not to marry him. 8 years later, he comes back into her life. I love Anne Elliot. I love her character. She is so fantastic. And I love her patience with her family, because her family is terrible. Her dad is this self-centered, egocentric, almost hypochondriac, and her sisters are awful, but Anne has so much patience, and she has no choice. She has to live somewhere with her family because she's a single woman. I like Captain Wentworth. He is a great character. This is a fantastic book. Don't let the fact that it's a classic scare you off. It's readable, it's funny, it's witty, it's great. And I want to read you the letter that Captain Wentworth writes to Anne towards the end of this book because it is just so fantastic. He writes, I can no longer listen in silence. I must speak to you by such means as are within my reach. You pierce my soul. I am half agony, half hope. Tell me not that I am too late, that such precious feelings are gone forever. I offer myself to you again with a heart even more your own than when you almost broke it 8.5 years ago. Dare not say that man forgets sooner than woman, that his love has an earlier death. I have loved none but you. Unjust I may have been, weak and resentful I have been, but never inconstant. You alone have brought me to Bath. For you alone I think and plan. Have you not seen this? Can you not fail to understand my wishes? I have not waited even these 10 days. Could I have read your feelings, as I think you must have penetrated mine? I can hardly write. I am every instant hearing something which overpowers me. You sink your voice, but I can distinguish the tones of that voice when they would be lost on others. Too good, too excellent creature. You do us justice indeed. You do believe that there is true attachment and constancy among men. Believe it to be most fervent, most undeviating in F.W. I must go, uncertain of my fare, but I shall return hither, or follow your party as soon as possible. A word, a look, will be enough to decide whether I enter your father's house this evening or never. Persuasion by Jane Austen. So those are 5 of my favorites. I'd love to hear about yours. Down in the comments, share with me what are some of your favorite books. I think they're a great way to get to know people and what they like, what their reading tastes are. So yeah, totally comment below. I would love to chat with you about what some of your 5 favorite books are, and I'll talk to you again soon.